Hello and welcome. And in today's video I'm going to talk about the trial of Field Marshal Erich von Manstein. Why am I doing it like this, appearing in front of the camera myself? And the reason for this is because of YouTube wanting people to show a little bit of authority that they know it, and they no longer want people to put up documentary style videos, which I do. I will continue to put up documentary style videos because I don't really like speaking in front of the camera myself. But anyway, that's the reason. Let's come on to Erich von Manstein. Now, Manstein is, I think, most people's favorite general. Now, for me, as a tactical sort of person and very much interested in military strategy, Manstein is the leading genius of all time in this respect. It's three battles which three campaigns I should say above all stand out. The first is the 1940 attack on France. Now, Hitler said it was his idea, but Manstein was the only one who really understood him when he put his ideas forward, and I think Manstein actually thought of the whole thing. The second one, which incidentally is a failure, but all the same, that's Winter Storm in 1942, the attempt to relieve Stalingrad, which in itself was a major logistical achievement, I would have to say. And following that, the third one, it's the counterattack which recaptured Kharkiv and Belgorod in February and March of 1943, and it's the latter which I think is probably the most brilliant strategic maneuver of all time. So, having said all these points about Erich von Manstein, there's also a number of things which happened, and I think he certainly is responsible for major war crimes, but that's very easy enough for me to say. Let's go back now 80 years and see what the situation was then. By 1947, the question of how Britain should deal with senior German military commanders in its custody had become increasingly difficult. Four particularly prominent officers were being held by British authorities. So there was Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, Field Marshal Walter von Brautisch, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, and Colonel General Adolf Strauss, all four senior figures of the Wehrmacht. None had been indicted at Nuremberg, and British officials were uncertain whether prosecuting them was legally necessary or politically desirable. Now, Manstein, of course, really did stand out. So widely regarded as one of Germany's most capable operational commanders and admired by former enemies. The British military historian Basil Liddell Hart described him as a formidable strategist capable of combining modern maneuver warfare, tactical mastery, and driving operational energy. And as far as Basil Liddell Hart is concerned, it was his book on the Second World War which really got me into this. I think the first book I read was probably because the World at War, when I was at school, was on the television, and so it was Mark Arnold Foster's book of that. But I went to Newcastle and I went and bought Basil Liddell Hart's history of the Second World War, which I read over and over and over again. Now, so his opinion is really quite valid to me. As Chief of Staff to von Rundstedt, Manstein had been one of the architects of the 1940 invasion of France. Later he commanded major formations on the Eastern Front and initially earned praise from Hitler for his operational successes before falling out with him over strategy. There was the case of the Battle of Kursk in 1943, which Manstein referred to it as a lost victory. A lost victory. And he, in all honesty, I think that Manstein was completely wrong as far as Kursk was concerned. I think when you read his book, then he hadn't understood how many Soviet lines were further back. So in that case, I do disagree. Now, and there was an incident in the late winter of 1944 when Manstein was seen. Hitler thought he was being insubordinate when he interrupted him. Hitler said some words to the effect of, if the worst comes to the worst, I expect all of my field marshals to stand around me with their daggers drawn. And Manstein said, so shall it be, mein Führer. And obviously that could be interpreted in two ways. It could be that they're there to protect him, but they're also there to stab him. And Hitler said initially, oh, yes, that's good. And then he lost his train of thought anyway. And I think it was that led to Manstein being dismissed. It needs to be pointed out also that Manstein had a rather low opinion of the Nazis. He trained his dog to do a Hitler salute, amongst other things. Now, despite all of this, Manstein, like Rundstedt and Brautisch, were suspected, particularly by the Americans, of responsibility for war crimes committed on the Eastern Front. Yet when the 4 officers were transferred to the United Kingdom in 1946, British legal officers noted the absence of concrete evidence. A Judge Advocate General, a JAG official, explicitly stated that he was unaware of any incriminating material and received no instructions to pursue further investigations. This reflected a broader British reluctance to prosecute senior German generals, combined with an equally strong refusal to extradite them to the Soviet Union. Now, by this time, of course, the Western Allies had fallen out with Stalin. Public pressure, however, began to mount. By late 1946 and early 47, the continued detention of these officers attracted growing attention from the press, church leaders, and amnesty campaigners. In October 1946, Bishop Theophil Wurm of Württemberg, head of the Evangelical Church in Germany, wrote to the British Foreign Office pleading for amnesty for Manstein and warning against extradition to the Soviet Union. Similar sentiments were echoed by prominent Christian intellectuals and journalists. So the situation became more acute in early 1947 when rumours emerged that the United States intended to try Manstein and others as part of the proposed Nuremberg proceedings against the German General Staff. Now, the British response was cautious and defensive. Officials argued that the Americans lacked jurisdiction and that surrendering the officers would be politically indefensible, particularly as other countries, but not the United States, had listed them as suspected war criminals. British thinking was shaped heavily by the trial then going on of Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, conducted by a British military court in Venice from February to May 1947. Kesselring was convicted of ordering reprisals and against Italian civilians and initially sentenced to death, which in my opinion was absolutely justified considering the amount of people killed in the caves to the south of Rome. The verdict provoked a storm of protest in the United Kingdom, including parliamentary debate and public intervention by Winston Churchill, who argued that executing defeated enemy commanders had lost whatever moral utility it had once possessed. Under intense political pressure, Kesselring's sentence was commuted to life imprisonment, a decision widely seen as reflecting sympathy for senior German officers rather than reassessment of guilt. The precedent weighed heavily on the Manstein question. British officials were acutely aware that trying another field marshal risked renewed controversy at a time when Cold War tensions were intensifying and Britain was seeking to stabilise relations with West Germany. So you can see, in this case, the British thought, well, we might be needing Manstein to defend us or help defend us against the Soviet Union. In August 1947, matters came to a head when General Lucius Clay, the American High Commissioner, formally raised the issue with British military authorities. He forwarded a detailed report from Telford Taylor's Nuremberg team, drawing on evidence from the International Military Tribunal. Now, although the International Military Tribunal had ruled that the General Staff was not a criminal organisation, it had also stated that individual commanders could bear responsibility for crimes committed under their authority. A further complication now became from the medical assessment. An Army Medical Board concluded that all 4 of these officers were seriously ill. And to be quite honest, that doesn't say much for the German Army as medical teams earlier. This assessment described Manstein as nearly blind and at risk of a heart attack. Home Office doctors disagreed, considering only browtish, unfit for trial. This was probably fair because he died shortly afterwards. Now, after prolonged negotiations, the United Kingdom agreed reluctantly to proceed with a prosecution, a decision being finalised in August of 1948. So only Manstein could be tried. Browtish died October 48. Rundstedt and Strauss were deemed medically unfit. How medically unfit? Well, okay, well that's a subject for another time. Manstein's trial began in Hamburg on the 24th of August 1949. It was the last war crimes trial to be conducted by a British military tribunal. Now, the proceedings attracted extraordinary attention and sympathy for the accused. Much of the British press emphasised Manstein's age, well, quite honestly, he wasn't that old, ill health and military distinction. Editorials questioned the morality and timing of the trial, particularly during the Berlin blockade and amid efforts to rebuild Germany as a Cold War ally. In Parliament, supporters referred to the defendants as elderly and honourable opponents, while critics argued that justice delayed had become justice distorted. Manstein was Manstein was charged with 17 accounts under the laws and customs of war. 3 related to crimes committed during the invasion of Poland when he served as Chief of Staff, 14 to actions on the Eastern Front when he held independent command. The prosecution was led by Sir Arthur Cummins Carr, who argued that mass murder and ill treatment, particularly of Jews, had been carried out on an enormous scale in Manstein's area of command. The central issue was not whether these crimes occurred, but the extent of Manstein's responsibility for permitting, facilitating, or failing to prevent them. Manstein pleaded not guilty. His defence was led by Reginald Paget, a British barrister, a member of the Labour Party, and indeed a member of Parliament, and he represented him free of charge. Paget challenged both the factual basis of the charges and the legitimacy of the trial itself. He claimed that the German army had behaved correctly in Poland, that Manstein was unaware of mass Jewish extermination, and that he'd merely followed superior orders. A defence explicitly rejected at Nuremberg. Paget's aggressive courtroom tactics culminated in the withdrawal of the Polish Observer, who accused the defence of glorifying Nazism and shifting the blame onto the victims. On the 19th of December 1949, the tribunal delivered its verdict. Manstein was acquitted on 8 charges, including the most serious allegations relating to direct complicity in the Holocaust. He was convicted on 9 counts and sentenced to 18 years in prison. This verdict provoked renewed debate. There are those who saw the acquittals as vindication. Others regarded the conviction as partial justice, diluted by political compromise. Observers noted the unusual spectacle of a British court trying a German general for crimes committed exclusively in Poland and the Soviet Union, whilst refusing extradition to those countries. Of course, it needs to be borne in mind that Poland was by this time under Soviet occupation and would remain so for the next 40 years. In subsequent years, Manstein's sentence was reduced and he was released early, reinforcing the perception that senior Wehrmacht commanders had benefited from a uniquely sympathetic post-war reckoning. The trial ultimately became emblematic of a broader failure to confront fully the role of the German army in Nazi crimes, a failure shaped as much by Cold War politics and cultural deference to the military professionalism as by legal uncertainty. Now, my own opinion is that Manstein was a war criminal, and he should have been for what he did or what he permitted when details of murders were reported to them. He told, for example, the officer who reported it, not to get involved. So he mightn't have passed the orders out himself, he mightn't have done it himself, but he didn't do anything to stop it. What I'll do in another video, if there's any demand, I'll look at the trial of Manstein in retrospect, seen from a modern perspective. Now, if you found this interesting, please do help me out one way. Put a comment below. It could just be hello. That's all that's necessary. But put some comment below. This is very difficult for me to fight against AI slop, which YouTube is now promoting. I'm doing videos which have been properly researched. Research costs money, and AI slop, you just ask Gemini or some other program to actually create a video, and it creates a video for you. So this is the problem. To make it worse, because these things are being created in Google's own products, it's preferring them over researched history. I do offer membership of this channel. In fact, membership, if this continues, membership will be the only way to actually access my videos. Now, membership costs £5 a month, or €6 or $6, gives you access to more than 800 members only videos at the current moment in time. So for the moment, thank you very much for watching. All the best from me. Bye for now.